Hi, Jim Ziegler, the Alpha Dawg. I've got an exciting show for us today. An old friend of mine, Gil Van Over. Gil and I have been friends, business associates for more than 20 years. And I consider Gil to be the foremost non-attorney legal compliance expert in the car business. How you doing, Gil?
Hey, I'm fabulous, Jim. You're doing good too.
I am doing absolutely exceptional. The dog is back.
Outstanding.
Today, we're going to talk about things that scare dealers, the scariest risks that dealers face every day, in the compliance world. Dealers now, you don't want exorbitant fines, and you certainly don't want to go to jail and be the bride of Big Bubba. So let's let's talk about the scariest risks. And what's the second part of that, Gil?
Well, it's a lot of times you'll hear about the scariest risk to scare the bejeebers out of you, but few people talk about how you can protect yourself, how you can mitigate those risks. And so I want to talk about obviously the risks that you have, the highest risks that you have as a dealer today, but also the process improvements that you can put into place to help mitigate those risks.
Yeah, well, that's what you specialize in, not just what scares you, but how to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
What processes you can put in place and what checks and balances. Okay, number one, what is the biggest, scariest thing that dealers are facing today that their employees are doing?
It's been an urban myth in the industry for the longest time that, if I'm a single point dealer, then I don't have to worry about it because I can stay under the radar. Nobody's going to bother me. Well, a single point dealer was just indicted by the Department of Justice within the last 2 months for credit application fraud. Single point dealer, credit application fraud.
Power
it's not
booking.
The first one this year.
Power booking.
Power booking and jicking credit apps. Improving income, giving people raises. Splitting their housing expenses, improving their ratios for credit worthiness.
I have seen this for 46 years in the industry. I've seen people altering credit applications, and usually the F&I manager gets blamed for it, but it usually comes out of the sales department.
It does. In fact, when we do our reviews, we stratify the risk, whether it was taking place in sales or whether it took place in F&I, based on a standard dealer process. They'll vary slightly from dealer to dealer, but generally speaking, sales is responsible for accepting the credit application and in many instances submitting it. And that's a sales function. In our reviews, we do over 1,000 reviews, review 1,000 dealerships a year. In our reviews, we find that generally speaking, the majority of the compliance issues that we find either start or germinate or are finalized in the sales department.
Okay, they start in the sales department. And I have always advocated, I teach F&I schools. And F&I gets a lot of, I definitely advocate that the F&I manager do a credit interview with 100% of the customers.
Absolutely.
Which is one of the things, even online, you're dealing with customers that they themselves might submit false information.
Correct.
So, and what do you think is the remedy from your viewpoint? What should dealers do?
Well, the standard for all of these processes is, if you're challenged 2 years down the road, what do you want to see in the deal file or the scanned file to support the fact that you didn't do anything wrong? One of the things I like to ask in our training sessions is, I'll pick out a finance manager and say, okay, tell me about the last deal that you spun. What was the customer's name? How much money did you make? What products did they buy? And they can rattle that off. I said, okay, now tell me about the deal that you did in the middle of last week. Now they start to fumble a little bit. Then I say, tell me about the deal that you did on your birthday. And they have no clue. And that's within the year, obviously, that's happened. You don't know, you can't remember the details of every deal. You do 75 deals a month, you do the math. So we want to be able to say the deal file is your best defense witness. The deal file is what's going to protect you if you're ever challenged. Because then you can say, you know, I don't know Mrs. Jones. I don't remember the deal for Mrs. Jones. I'm sure she's a lovely lady. I don't remember the deal, but I tell you what I do know. I know my processes. And here's
you taught me that years ago. And I've been reteaching it, to be real honest with, and I'm not sure I give you credit for it, but
I didn't copyright it, so
you know, why do I know I did that? Because I do it the same way every time. I say the same thing, you know.
And the deal file, the paperwork in the deal file supports the way that you do things.
Mm-hmm.
So the remedy here is you want to be able to present 2 pieces of paper to any regulator, any plaintiff's attorney, anybody that's challenging you that you jicked a credit app. You want the one that the customer gave you and is signed, and you want the one that you submitted to the bank and it's signed. All right. And then you look at the 5 key credit determinants that the feds look at, because I've worked on a couple of deals where dealers have been indicted by the Department of Justice. And I was retained by that dealer's attorney to set up a process that satisfied the FBI so they didn't prosecute the guy. So this is what the FBI agents tell me. They said, we look at the 5 key credit determinants. We look at time on the job, time at the address, and what you do for a living. Then we look at how much money you make and how much money you have to spend for your mortgage or your rent. And we look at what the customer gave you and what you gave the bank. And if there's differences and they're enhanced to improve the likelihood that somebody's going to get a deal bought, that's bank fraud. We don't care about
this. This is electronic submission, right? Where
correct.
Somebody took the credit app that the customer gave them and they put different information into the keyboard.
Correct.
So
if it's different, you committed bank fraud. We don't care about intent. You know, we don't care about honest mistakes. It's different. So therefore, we believe you tried to do that.
You are basically guilty till you're proven innocent.
Absolutely.
And once
so
again,
by having those 2 credit apps in the deal, and then, you know, periodically audit the work to make sure that those 5 key credit determinants are consistent. And when you do the interview, like you're supposed to do the interview in F&I, if you find out that the salesperson or the customer gave you net instead of gross, and you're going to submit gross, which is what you need to do. I mean, that's presenting the deal in the fashion that the finance source is looking for. They want gross income, not net. So you just need to either have POI in the deal to support the difference, or if you don't have POI, go back to the original credit app, have the customer make the change, and then issue it.
You're right. Most lenders' algorithms consider 75% of 100% of the customer's gross income. They've already deducted for taxes and fees and whatever. That's already in their calculation. Mm-hmm. You don't need to net out their expenses. You need to basically do it from a gross viewpoint.
Right.
So power booking is adding to the customer's income, adding income sources they really don't have, adding income they really don't make, coaching the customer through it. I have seen that so many times where the customer did sign it, mm-hmm. and the salesperson put the words in their mouth.
Correct.
You know, how many times have I seen somebody with a $5,000 a month income and, well, she's a waitress. That's tips. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Or, you know, we're more likely to get the deal approved if we only show half of what you pay for rent because you got a roommate. You know, the feds say you need to report the housing expense as what that consumer's obligated contractually to pay. So if they're on a mortgage and it's a joint mortgage and the mortgage is $1,200 a month, you need to put $1,200 a month. Now that's where the notes in all of these application submission portals provide you with notes so that you can send a note to the analyst says, you know, has a roommate, pays half, and then let the finance source make the change.
Exactly. So power booking, now that's only half of power booking. Power booking is income and equipment on the car. I have seen so many managers add wheels and sunroofs and equip stereo systems that the car really doesn't have. And generally the F&I manager gets tagged with it.
That you're right, and it's unfortunate the F&I manager gets tagged with it, and that's why we highly recommend to our clients that a manager who actually touched the vehicle is the one that signs the book out sheet that goes to the finance source. It's typically going to be the pre-owned sales manager, used car sales manager, but it's very rare for an F&I manager to get up out of her seat and go out and check the options on the vehicle.
Very rare.
But if you don't have a signed book out by the used car manager and you do get challenged by the finance source and have to pay off a deal because it was power booked, you don't know who to go back after.
I have actually seen managers coach the power booking. So if you are an F&I manager, you're a finance manager, I want the used car manager, the pre-owned manager to sign off the equipment, to sign off the booking sheet on the car, where they are fully responsible if it ever gets down to any legal issue. Is that fair?
That's fair, because you can either require that or you can, buy a supply of soap on a rope. Your choice.
Exactly. Bride of Big Bubba. So, okay. So power booking, two parts: falsification of income.
Mm-hmm.
And the other part is adding equipment on the car that the car really doesn't have, or even misrepresenting the model. Whatever, and that generally gets caught. What is the second scariest thing?
Second scariest thing is identity theft. The stats say that 25 to 30% of consumers in the United States have been affected by identity theft, either personally or someone in the household. So, if I'm doing a recap meeting and there's 20 managers in the room and I ask them to raise their hands, there's generally more than 5 people who raise their hand that they've been affected by it. I've been affected by it. So it happens. And unfortunately, the thieves are getting better. Then now they've created a nuanced identity theft called synthetic identity fraud. And it's very difficult to catch. And the latest reports from the Federal Reserve would suggest that about 20% of the losses that the lenders faced or have today or in the last couple of years are due to synthetic identity theft.
Explain that, synthetic identity theft.
You know the movie Frankenstein.
Oh.
And Dr. Frankenstein, what did he do? He took a head from one body, a torso from another body, arms from a third body, legs and feet from a fourth body, and he stitched them all together and he created a monster, right?
Uh-huh.
Right. Synthetic identity theft is exactly the same thing. They create an identity that doesn't exist. They'll use, Jim Ziegler's name. They'll get the Social Security card or Social Security number from a 10-year-old that's got stolen, doesn't have a credit profile yet. They'll create an address for that. They'll generate a separate address, and they just create all of these components that you use to pull a credit bureau report, and they pull them together, and they create an identity. They then become an authorized user on a credit card, say an American Express. That creates a credit profile with all the credit reporting agencies. After that gets paid on time for a couple, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, they get a prepaid credit card. Now they've got 2 lines of credit. All right. So they over 2 or 3 year period of time, they gradually build up a good credit profile on somebody that doesn't exist with 3 or 4 lines of credit. And because they're paying these small amounts on time, they've got a 700 plus bureau score. Once they've accomplished that, they go on a spending spree, and they go out and get $200,000-$300,000 worth of merchandise, which they then turn around, and sell off, and then they're gone, and you can't find them because they never existed in the first place.
I have seen people that merge senior and juniors credit files.
Right.
By pulling the bureau over and over again. A lot of people don't realize every time you pull a credit bureau, it updates itself with the information that's input by the user. So if you pull a credit bureau over and over again, you can merge identities.
Yes.
I can use dad's address and junior's social and start to merge those. And a couple of times you've got a merge credit app.
Yeah, and sometimes the bureaus
file.
If you don't send enough identifiers when you report it, for example, I'm the third. I'm Gil Van Over the third. That's how you get GVO3. It's my monogram. There were times when early in my life that some of my dad, who's junior, credit information got reported on mine, which helped me, quite frankly. It helped a lot, but that's how it can happen. There's also, it hasn't been confirmed, but there's a suspicion in the industry that maybe some of the nefarious credit repair organizations, and they're not all nefarious, but some of them are using synthetic identities to help people create a new credit profile.
Well, I will go so far as to
life.
say I'm fairly certain that is happening, because I communicate with a lot of dealers, and not that all credit repair agencies are bogus, but there is certainly, when you're dealing with a credit repair agency, there are some of them using, and I didn't ever call it synthetic identity theft, but yeah, I see how they're merging bureaus, how they're doing things that have been around for 30 years that I know about. But now it's gotten to be more high tech. Technologies come into it, and how does the dealer have any risk in that?
Well, it's very difficult to detect to begin with. Some of the credit bureau agencies that they get their credit bureau report and their red flags report from are starting to create a synthetic identity theft detection. So that's an option that you could buy. So you can get the OFAC check, you can get the red flags check, you can get a synthetic identity that check. Some of the flags that you look for are, does the in file date kind of match the age? So, if you're 60 years old and you've only had an in file credit or in file date of maybe 4 years in your credit report, when we used to see that, we used to always just assume that they were either overseas or in jail, right? Well, now it could be that they're identity theft.
One thing I found out, a lot of women change their names when they get married and such, and they change a digit or two in their social security number, and you don't pull a bureau on them. And I found out a little trick as an F&I manager. If you put a bureau in with all zeros for the social security number, you'd be amazed at what'll pop up sometimes.
I've never tried it, but I can believe it.
You put all zeros in, and if they've altered their social security number, many times the real credit file will pop up.
Oh, that's good to know. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's just a little F&I trail.
Well, maybe part of that is the fact that you can pull a credit report without a social.
Exactly.
The likelihood that you have the correct profile is enhanced if you have a social, but you can still get one without. So maybe that's what you're talking about doing.
One thing I look at is not the reverse of what you just said. I look for a guy 30 years old that's had credit since 1970.
Right. That's another one. That's another identifier. You're absolutely right.
Stole dad's file.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So you mentioned
the other part of identity theft that's really become a higher risk now because of the pandemic and because of the desire to do digital deliveries, and where the consumer never ever comes to the showroom. That becomes a process that's very easy for an identity thief to steal your cars. So you really need to set up a good out of area delivery process. And we developed a procedure after chatting with a number of dealers on how they were handling it, and we've come up with a pretty solid approach on how to protect yourself against these identity thieves that are never showing up in your showroom, because
I never even thought
everybody
of that.
Knows how to zoom. Everybody knows how to zoom now, right?
I never thought of that, because some people, that we're getting into the Carvana age, the Amazon age, where we're taking the cars, concierge delivery to the people's homes,
right?
Or to a third location, their office, whatever, and we really don't know who we're dealing with. And where's the dealer's liability in that?
Well, they've got a rep and a warrant in their lender agreements that says that they positively identified who they're dealing with. And if the lender gets a case of identity theft, your insurance isn't going to cover it and you're going to buy it back. That's your
So,
risk.
so anyway, you're a Mercedes dealer. You just took $100,000 risk.
Right.
That I hadn't even thought of that. That is
Yeah.
incredible. You mentioned something a minute ago, the bad guys list, OFAC. How much enforcement's really happening with that?
You don't see a lot of enforcement because you don't see a lot of people transacting business with anybody on the list. Now, I will tell you this great story. I have a dealer that was checking OFAC. They got a positive hit. They were out of the state right around the Mississippi River, let's say. They had a positive hit on an OFAC. They called the number like they're supposed to, like they've been trained to do. They called the number. The gentleman that answered it at OFAC says, "Well, why are you calling us?" So they didn't know. Go figure. So anyway, they explained what they had. They explained who they had, and sure enough, it was a true hit. But it was a drug dealer. It wasn't a terrorist necessarily, but it's a drug dealer, and they're on the list as well because that's one way that you can launder money to support terrorism. So he was on the list. The feds were looking for him. He was paying cash, so they told the dealer, "Deliver the truck, get your money, deliver the truck, and send us all the paperwork on the titling and licensing process." So they knew that the guy was living in the Houston area somewhere, but they didn't know where. So they waited at the border for him to come across the border into Texas, and they nabbed him. So there are legitimate people that are on that list in our country, and you have to check it. Probably.
Now OFAC, for the people listening to this broadcast, that's the Office of Foreign Asset Control.
Correct.
So OFAC, and it's the bad guys list. And you need to take an OFAC on everybody. Correct me if I'm misstating here, Gil, but even if it's a cash deal, you have to have a vehicle to pull an OFAC on. Even your employees, you're supposed to have an OFAC on everybody that works at the dealership.
Right. Well, not only that, but also the guys that come in to buy the wholesalers. You should have run your list of wholesalers against OFAC quarterly. But the one that a lot of dealers tend to miss, and it's easy to miss, I get it, is if you take money or a trade from a third party on a deal. You need to check that third party. OFAC regulations say you have to check OFAC on every person that you do business with. Now, even though they're not on the contract, they contributed to the contract. So if I came in to lease a car from you and I wrote a check out of GVO3 Consulting's checking account, you got to check GVO3 Consulting as well as Gil Van Over. If I'm gifting a trade to my son, it's been free and clear. It's an old sled. I'm just gifting it to him to get rid of it so he get a little bit of credit on his car, on his purchase. You got to check OFAC on me because it's titled in my name, even though I'm not on the contract.
It's deep. And see, one thing I see in dealerships, I'm big on compliance myself, and you instilled that in me when I first met you 20 years ago, and I attended so many of your seminars. And I've actually spoken on compliance at NADA conventions because I've become a student, and you inspired that. And I got to tell you, dealers say to me, "Well, we've been getting away with that for years." I said, "Well, how many times would you have to get caught before it ruins your life?"
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I remember, back in the 90s when Gunderson Chevrolet in California, when 20 government agents walked in with guns drawn and grabbed all their computers and put their managers in jail. And every one of those managers woke up that day. One manager that went to jail was named Don Poteet. I remember him. He was the F&I manager. He was the guy they were really after.
Right.
And I know that for a fact that Don Poteet did not wake up that morning and know he was going to go to jail. He'd been getting away with whatever they claimed he was getting away with for years.
Mm-hmm.
He did not know. And so you tell me, "Well, Jim, we've been doing that for years." Well, You only got to get caught one time before it ruins your life.
Maybe you're right.
You know?
You're absolutely right. Yeah, you got to think of it this way: is just because we used to do it that way and we've always done it that way doesn't make it right, because a lot of yesterday's practices are today's felonies. It's just that simple, unfortunately. And when dealers say that, well, we haven't been caught, luck of the draw, like you said, risk management's philosophy, and a lot of, some dealers don't have that risk management cap in their office. But if they have a good controller, a good CFO who understands risk and manages the risk, understands that even though we haven't been caught, doesn't mean that we can't be caught. And let me understand what I need to do and where my risks are and how I can put processes in place to mitigate those risks. And that's kind of what we try to do. And with identity theft, we want to make sure we talk about the solution there. Identity theft and OFAC both is every dealer that I've seen anymore, subscribes to a red flags check with the company that they're pulling
CBI,
from.
Equifax, whoever's
Right.
pulling the
Or Dealer Track, Route 1,
Track,
700 credit, whichever one they're using, and it doesn't matter. They're all good. They all provide that check.
But there's a lot of people you don't pull a credit bureau with.
Well, red flags strictly applies from the statute perspective. It applies to only deals that you control the financing on. So if it's a cash deal, you really don't need to do red flags.
Oh, I didn't know that. See,
Yeah. Well, red flags addresses identity theft in financing or leasing a vehicle. So if it's a cash deal, you don't have to run red flags. It's maybe a good practice to make sure that you're not selling a vehicle to an identity thief. But you don't have to run red. Now you have to do OFAC on every deal.
That's what I was talking OFAC.
Okay.
Okay, so
OFAC on every single
correct.
deal. Red flags on financed and leased deals. But where dealers get tripped up a little bit is they run the search. When they pull the bureau, the search is done automatically. They may get a warning and they ignore it. Or they may get a warning and they don't take the proper remediation to adequately clear that. So for example, if you get a warning that the address isn't right, and the reason you get that is because the address that you input is different than what the bureau has, or what they found in 500 other databases that they look at for red flags. It's different. Identity thieves don't want mail going to the victim. So they give you a different address. So when you get an address discrepancy, you first check to see if you made a typographical error when you put it in. I got fat fingers. I'm always making mistakes. We make mistakes. If you have a typo, put it in again with the right information to see if that clears it. If it doesn't clear it, you need to get proof of roof at that address. That's the only way to clear an address discrepancy. And the first things an identity thief is going to forge or create are driver's licenses, insurance cards, and registration. You can't use that to clear an address discrepancy. If you look at what the subprime companies will stip you for when they stip you for proof of roof, they give you a list of what's acceptable. Communications bills, mortgage payments, tax statements, those types of things.
Okay, so for red flags, you can pretty well rely on what the secondary lenders require for stips, because those are the same things that are going to prove in a situation on red flags.
Plus, if you have a red flag, there's a great chance the finance source is going to ask for that anyway. They're going to stip you for it because they got to clear it on their end too, right? So Jim, I provided you with a flow chart for OFAC and for red flags, that we use and we give to our clients to help. So, a lot of our clients will take that flow chart, they'll laminate it, and it's at the sales manager's desk. Here's what you got to do to clear this before it gets TO, DEF, and I. So if you want to share that with your audience, you're more than welcome to.
One thing I always love to do as a consultant walking in a dealership, and I am not a compliance consultant, I always deferred that to you, but one thing I always loved to do when I was consulting a dealership, I would show up at 7 o'clock in the morning when the service department was open and the sales department was not yet open.
Right.
And I would walk through the dealership and I would take anything that was in plain sight off the top of a desk that wasn't under lock and key. I wouldn't open a drawer but any piece of paperwork that was customers' proprietary information. And I would walk in the dealer's office at 8:30 when they showed up and say, here's your violations. And I'd put this big pile of papers on their desk and say, at $11,000 a violation, I think I got about $200,000 here.
That's a great visual. Yeah, isn't that a great visual?
I found these.
Or if you really wanted to be mean, hold on to it until about 11 o'clock when everybody's frantically looking for it.
Oh, when they're all looking for it and they're panicking, and because a minimum of $11,000 per violation, minimum. Some of them carry heavier violations than that. And once again, you taught me that. And I'm looking at all these, credit applications out in plain sight with the social and things that are supposed to be under lock and key all over the dealership.
Well, I'm glad you decided you didn't want to become a compliance consultant. Just as I tell everybody, I'm not a sales guy, I'm not a Ziegler. So if you want somebody to teach you how to sell, you got to get Ziegler. If you want somebody to say the way that you're selling is compliant, then I'm your guy.
You're definitely the guy. Okay, so we've already scared the dealers. We've given them some solutions. What else should scare a dealer right now? If I'm a dealer, what should I'd be waking up in the middle of the night and say, damn.
You really need to check your desking process. The way that you desk deals have so many potential compliance issues. Right now, the CFPB, they rescinded their guidance on fair lending. NADA came out yesterday and said that there's a possibility that might be revisited. And they're looking at disparate impact and discrimination in the way that you desk deals, and the way that you finalize them. So you need a strong first pencil methodology. How's that first pencil going to go out, and then apply that consistently. So it doesn't matter if you're dealing with a protected class or not. It doesn't matter whether the person is of color. It doesn't matter what their orientation is sexually. It doesn't matter if they're male or female. All you're looking at as a dealer is green. So you start the deal out in the most favorable position for the dealer. But if you're going to quote that payment, you make sure it gets quoted in a consistent fashion every single time. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I was just looking at doing a review, and in one of the systems, the desking systems out there, need to go check your presets. Need to check the forms that you can print out of there. I found in one last year, there was a form within there that the dealer could print out. It says retail worksheet 40. So I figured that doesn't sound like the standard, description of what I see on a desk and pencil. So I pulled it up, and guess what? It was $40 worth of leg built into that payment.
I see it all the time, and I'm amazed because payment packing has been around since 1998.
Right.
Christine Gregoire in the state of Washington, who was the state attorney general, was the first person to prosecute payment packing. That her and Doug Walsh, her assistant, made that term up.
Yes, they did.
I got in a big hassle at the F&I convention because I said, payment packing technically is not illegal. And people and compliance people in the audience just jumped all over me. I said, it's never been court tested, and it's been an interpretation that it's probably illegal, but nobody has ever fought it. Nobody, even universal underwriters and the people that were first prosecuted for payment packing, they didn't fight it. They paid it and moved. So there's no case law. It's never been prosecuted.
Yeah.
Everybody paid and made a deal before they got to judgment.
Well, that doesn't mean it's not illegal, though, Jimmy.
I admit that it is illegal.
There's a difference between not being legal and paying the piper. But there's so many forms of what can now be considered payment packing that we score every single deal that we do. We have an industry standard scorecard that we do, so we can tell you how you stack up versus the other 1,000 dealers that we do business with. But this year I stratified the difference between payment packing and sales and payment packing and F&I, because it can happen in both places.
Well, payment packing and F&I, can I jump in a second?
Uh-huh.
One thing that I have seen, you know, deceptive trade practices. Now, deceptive trade practices are discriminatory or predatory. You know, those are the two categories of deceptive trade practices: discriminatory or predatory, or anything that's designed to confuse the customer.
Right.
You know, so predatory, discriminatory, or intentionally confusing the people. And one thing that people don't know, and I don't know if you've ever addressed this, service contracts. In 45 states, service contracts are negotiable. There are certain states like Florida, and I think Wisconsin maybe, where they're an insurance product and have to be sold at a predetermined price. But there's 45 states that you can sell a service contract for whatever the bank will finance and the customer will pay. And to be non-discriminatory, you've got to start that service contract at the same price for every consumer. And since different models of cars have different prices of service contracts, it either has to be a set percentage of markup where the dealer, and I'm not going to price fix, but I'm going to say, if the dealer says, okay, we will mark up a service contract 50%, 100% of the time, and since we are in a negotiating state, we can negotiate down from there, but we have to have the same starting figure for all consumers.
Yeah.
Or a set dollar amount. We will mark them up $800 or whatever. I'm not price fixing $400. Make up a number. But whatever it is, it's the same for every consumer. Does that make sense to you?
It does. It, you know, because if you want to be able to defend yourself against discriminatory practices, the best way is that everybody gets the same deal to start with. You know, and then from there, it's a negotiation. You're absolutely right. The other thing you have to be concerned about with service contracts is, you know, I think it's been well reported in the industry that the FTC is kind of sniffing around that, you know, and the pricing on that. So, you know, if as a dealer, you need to have pricing guidelines on what you'll sell.
That's what I'm saying. Pricing
Because
guidelines.
if you don't self-regulate it, somebody else will, and you don't want that.
The same starting figure for every customer. In negotiating states, it doesn't necessarily have to end up that way if you're negotiating.
Right.
But you cannot change an interest rate during the sale on the premise that they're going to buy products.
That's right. Can't trade rate for product.
You can't trade rate for product. You can't say, well, if you take a service contract, I'll lower the rate.
That's right.
Once you have said that, you know, then you have created a violation. Right. Now, here's the one I really want to talk about. You ready?
Sure.
Texting.
Yeah, we don't do a lot in the area of texting. Yeah, I know though that you've got to have permission, and you know you got to treat it like a phone call follow up. And you know, after a period of time, if you don't have the permission or the permission runs out, you can't text.
There are some companies out there right now selling dealers mass texting. Mass texting is illegal, and they're getting some pretty good results. Yeah. That's why the dealers are like a bunch of guppies. You know, here comes the bait. You know, the dealers are going for it because it does get some pretty good results.
I bet it does.
But mass texting is illegal. You've got to have an opt-in every single time you text. Every single time. And the fines are exorbitant.
And the ability to opt out if the consumer sends you back a note to opt out.
They can say stop, the word stop, right. and you got to stop texting them.
That's right.
And that is not being adhered to. A lot of the CRMs are putting texting in once again. And here's the biggest exposure dealers have. They've got employees texting on their personal cell phones.
Yeah, it's bad news.
Bad exposure because they're certainly not opting in. They're certainly not doing legal. You don't have a record. The consumer can crucify you. Anything else that we've left out on the top 10 scary things?
Yeah, I think we've covered the highlights. If anybody wants to talk about particulars, obviously you'll give them my contact information. And
I'm going to do it right now. And I'm going to put it in the text that accompanies this video. This is Gil Van Over, Gil, Gil, not two L's, one,
Not a fish.
not a fish, no, Gil, Gil at GVO, Gil Van Over 3.com, GVO3.com, Gil at GVO3.com. And and that's his website, GVO3, the number 3.com. Now I'm going to put that in all the text that goes along with this video.
That's the letter O too, Jim.
That's the letter O. Yeah, not the zero.
It's somebody. When people say you didn't get my email, you didn't respond to my email, I said, well, what did you use? I said GVO, the number O, GVO3. You're like 007. I'm 4 short of 007, right?
No.
Or sometimes I'll get GOV3, Gov3.
What the heck? Gil Van Over is the man's name. Gil, Gil. Gil at GVO3.com. Go to the website, GVO3.com, and you can contact Gil. And I'm going to put his phone number up. I'm going to put your cell phone number on this thing too.
Fair enough.
And this video.
We also wanted to talk about the friends and family discount we're going to offer.
Uh-oh. You're going to give something away?
Not a giveaway, but a reduction, friends and family. I wrote a book.
Oh my gosh, you're an author now.
I'm an author. Automotive Compliance in a Digital World.
Automotive Compliance in a Digital World. Well, what are you going to do for my friends?
Well, we're going to do a friends and family discount. You go to the website, you buy the book, you put in Jimmy, put Jimmy's friend, and we'll sell it $49.95. We'll sell it to you for $19.95 plus shipping.
Okay. Put in Jimmy's friend, Jimmy Ziegler. I haven't been Jimmy Ziegler since I was 10, but okay, Jimmy Ziegler.
Only your best and longest friends call you Jimmy, right?
Yeah, they're the ones who get away with it. I used to be a lot bigger.
Yeah,
anyway,
when you were powerlifting, I don't know that I would have called you Jimmy.
Yeah, well, last time I bench pressed 450, I was 58 years old, I believe.
I remember that.
58 years old, and I was still bench pressing 450. It was
right.
I was in the Battle of the Toughest, which was a precursor to the Ultimate Fighting Championship. I was a terrible fighter, but I was in there.
You could take a punch.
I could take a punch. Well, anyway, I am so glad you are my friend, and I'm gonna put this on the Alpha Dawg on demand platform. I need your permission to do that.
Absolutely, and thank you so much.
Yeah, I don't use written releases. I just make you say it on video.
Yeah, your handshake is a contract to me. So
you and I have got a lot of equity in this friendship.
Yeah,
Gil,
we do.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you. You're
so much, Jim.
exceptional.